Last time on the Salty Siren.
16,683.
Is that the number of people that the Grey Ghost could carry?
God fucking damn it. Okay, yep.
Hey, let's go.
The Queen Mary does like a little teensy bit of, just kind of like for fun, like European and Americans frolicking back and forth on transatlantic voyages. Queen Mary goes all the way to Singapore in March of 1940, gets 33 anti-aircraft guns fitted to her decks, a degaussing strip. So the Germans are basically about to win in the Suez Canal, but they are completely unprepared for the Queen Mary just rolling up with Rule Britannia, Britannia Rule the Waves blaring and dumping 14,000 fresh troops onto the beaches, who then basically proceed to completely turn around the fighting in North Africa. Each day of the voyage would have a designated ham man whose sole job it was to just cut ham. There were a couple points where they recorded the temperature in like the sort of troop compartments on the ship as over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The quote-unquote beds, I say beds here loosely because they were really like a canvas sheet pulled taut across a rectangular metal frame. They had 18 inches between each one. Imagining that, and then it being 110 degrees, not accounting for like literally probably like 5,000 dudes.
Yeah, it's like a human lasagna.
God damn it.
O'er the wild windy sea, I can hear her calling to me. So let's heave away, haul away, and fill our eyes with the shore. Calls to friends, ale and light, and a tale to brighten the night. So heave away, haul away, and heed the siren song.
Okay, so here we come back to that 3,500 number as like the rated number. So needless to say, 14,000 is quite a ways over that, and so if too many people gathered in one part of the ship, it could unbalance it. And even when she was a commercial ship, I believe the Queen Mary carried a reputation as being easy to roll. And so with 14,000 guys on board, they really wanted to sort of evenly balance her as best they could. So and I thought this was kind of a neat little system. When you boarded the ship, they gave you either a red, white, or blue button, and then had sections of the ship marked in sort of blue, red, white, or blue coloring. And if you had a red button, you went to the red section of the ship, and you were not allowed to leave it. And the same went for white and blue. So that way it roughly balanced out how many people were in what parts of the ship, and kept her relatively even. So eventually the Queen Mary stopped going to Australia because Japan had become much more active in that part of the Pacific, and it was decided that it wasn't safe for her to be over there with how many Japanese warships were rolling around. So from there on, she pretty much just did laps between Scotland and America. And the big thing that she participated in here was Operation Bolero. So Operation Bolero was basically an attempt to just dump a huge number of troops into Europe all at the same time, so that the Germans would suddenly get slammed with this tide of over 1 million troops at once. And Queen Mary, because she was faster than every other ship in the fleet, led the pack of Operation Bolero. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But going back to the sort of issues with rolling, a big part of what made those issues tough was that when she was initially constructed, she had... I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce... I literally just wrote down like random letters for the names of these engines because I knew I couldn't pronounce them, and after last time, we're just gonna skip it. But all you need to know is that she had real thicky McThickums engines in her belly that gave her over 200... Let me make sure I've got that right. I swore I wrote this down. Okay, yep. Over 200,000 horsepower. Jesus Christ. But at some point, somebody was like, hey, there are these other engines, and the ones she has are kind of getting worn out, so why don't we put these engines and these new boilers down there instead? It's going to equal out to about the same amount of horsepower, and they weigh less, so they're going to make her faster on top of that. Problem is that with the boilers and the engines down like kind of as deep in the ship as possible, when they switched to the newer, more efficient, lighter versions, it took a lot of the weight out of her gut, and so instead of being the thick mama that she was before, she slimmed down a bit, and that made her a bit less agreeable with not ideal weather conditions. So
I see.
She kind of had a reputation for being a bit unsteady beforehand, and the engine/boiler swap made it worse. And then they put 14,000 troops on her at once. So
became the Suzuki Samurai of World War II ships.
I am unfamiliar with the Suzuki Samurai.
Not, all things considered, not a bad car, except for the fact that it would roll over pretty much on a dime.
Is that the three-wheeled one?
No, it's not that one. This is just like a car. It looks like a 4x4, like
okay,
whatever.
But you just like a stiff breeze and it went rolling.
Yeah, it was a meme for a while.
Damn, I'd say that's fair. The one thing with the Queen Mary though is that although she rolled a lot, it was never considered within dangerous parameters. So the couple troops on had reports of just everywhere on the ship smelled like vomit.
Excellent.
So, that on top of like 18 inches between you and the dude like puking a fucking Old Faithful geyser. Oh, Jesus. Just the image of like how much that shit must have sucked. I know it was 4 days, and like no matter how miserable it was, like it's 4 days, but still, good God. So, right. Anyway, the overloading really exacerbated the rolling somewhat, and there was this British officer who was just like, yes, a stiff breeze and it would spill the milk out of my tea. That's like, yeah, okay. Like the most
Sure,
important.
that's one way of putting it.
Everyone else is like, I'm like dying of heat stroke in the bowels of the ship.
I might literally be dying.
Everyone's puking. There's no room to sleep. Please. And then this British officer's like, my tea. Oh. Well, with a stark tonal shift, we will get on to the tragic accident that the HMS Queen Mary participated in. So, as the Germans really ramped up the bombing of the UK, they decided that the Queen Mary, while she was faster than her escort ships, should have an escort arriving in the UK. And so they started sort of sending out cruisers or destroyers, like relatively minor ships, but still to kind of help her on her way back in, give her that little extra bit of protection. And so on October 2nd in 1942, also, man, this does make me seem like a horrible person. The first note that I put for this is tragic accident, lol. Which
Rip in peace, lol.
Honestly, one of my faults slash I've forgotten what the fucking inverse of fault is. Good God. One of my faults, but also one of the things that some people, I think, enjoy about me, is that I joke about everything. And so I read this, and especially how stupid it was, and I was like, damn, that's kind of funny in a morbid way. So I promise, I do want to make it clear here that this was a terrible, unnecessary loss of life, but holy hell if it couldn't have been avoided. So the Queen Mary is on approach to Scotland, and the ship, the HMS Curaçao, named after some isles off of Queensland in Australia, is coming out to meet her. And they're basically like, hey, what's up, Queen Mary? And Queen Mary's like, hey, what's up, Curaçao? And the Curaçao begins to sort of like turn around so they can both head back to port. As the Curaçao turns, the Queen Mary's like, oh, we're going to hit him. Like, we're definitely going to hit him. And the Curaçao looks out and is like, damn, the Queen Mary's definitely going to hit us. But on the Queen Mary, they were like, well, they know we're under orders that we have to stick to our course, and we literally can't stop for anything. They'll get out of the way. And on the Curaçao, they were like, well, we're a military vessel, and they're not. They'll get out of the way. And then they decided to not talk about this at all until they were like, damn, they're gonna hit us, and it is too late to do anything.
That's excellent.
Like, literally no communication. Like, they're just like, damn, they're gonna be in our way. We'll hit them if we keep on this course. But they're gonna move. And
imagine being in an era where, like, literally radio has just been invented. You can talk to anyone in the world pretty much, pretty quickly. Like, that's pretty amazing. And they said, why bother? Let's just, do what we're going to do.
Yeah. And I mean, like, granted, on ships of that size, there is, to use a hashtag gamer term here, there is a bit of input lag. That if you're the captain and you're like, oh shit, we're gonna hit him, and you're like, alright, full stop, full stop, full stop, it's gotta get passed through probably like 13 layers of people before it hits the engine rooms and they begin trying to stop the ship. So I can understand some of that playing a factor in it, but if you see something that you're like, we're gonna ram them if we keep going like this, let's make sure, and just calling them and being like, hey, Curaçao, can you fucking move? And then being like, oh yeah, totally, dude. And there you go. You've saved countless lives, because they ultimately don't do this. The Queen Mary literally cleaves the Kurosawa into two parts. It is just like a clean ram, the direct nose of the Queen Mary into the side of the Kurosawa, and they split the Kurosawa in half. The soldiers on the Queen Mary try to help in whatever way they can. They toss like anything that could float overboard. But the even stupider part of all of this, and I understand the circumstances, the orders they were given, but the Queen Mary was like, we can't stop. That's our orders. And so just kept on trucking. And so the Kurosawa is split in half. I don't have exact numbers for how many were lost, but a lot, and a lot of them drowned from exhaustion or due to hypothermia, because they were in the very cold waters for hours before another convoy of ships could stop and help them. And so it was just dumb on all sides. I know, like, the Queen Mary does literally have $1 million bounty on its head and is like, we cannot stop for anything. Those were their orders. But ultimately, the British Admiralty and the US government decide that it's such a colossal fuck up all around that it would be a huge hit to morale if it got out. And so they cover it up. And it really doesn't get out until after the war is already over, at which point there's an official investigation that, from what I read, was basically like, yeah, we fucked up, and then doesn't do anything. So, frustrating, but desperate times and all that. It's just sad that so many had to lose their lives because of it, and the frankly absurd lack of communication was just, it's so ridiculous that it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a bad movie, kind of. Like
they'll turn.
Like
they'll turn. Let's not consult each other on this.
Captain, I would think the turn and.
Oh man, it's dumb. But in this case, Queen Mary's steadfast constitution does actually see her through pretty well, despite literally cleaving a warship in half. Her second hull holds firm. And so she gets to England, offloads the troops, and they're like, it's not safe for you to stay here long enough to get repaired because we're being bombed constantly. So it actually just makes the journey back to the US in its damaged state, and is like completely fine, if a little bit slowed down, because she's not as hydrodynamic. Yeah, there we go, as she was before. But she gets patched up in the US and is pretty much in ship shape before too long. But yeah, then we're kind of getting close to the wrapping up stage here. But by the end of the war, she had earned the nickname
the Rolling Mary.
All those previously mentioned issues. And in December of 1942, they had been sort of steadily creeping up the number of troops that they could send with her. And at this point, she was carrying 16,000.
Yo.
So 16,000 troops. And December of 1942, she's about halfway across the Atlantic when she encounters the worst storm of her career. Waves are, I believe, averaging 65 feet. So she's like really, really going over them like crazy. And finally, after a while of sort of cresting and falling and cresting and falling, and I'm sure everyone being like about to puke, a rogue wave actually just slaps right into the fucking side of the Queen Mary, over 90 feet tall, estimated, and looking at sort of the instruments on board, they believed if she had tipped an additional 3 degrees, she would have capsized. But despite portholes, windows being blown out, bits of her superstructure being damaged, all sorts of injuries being taken to the med bay from people being literally hurled from their bunks, she makes it through, delivers those 16,000 troops to Scotland, undergoes minor repairs, and then just gets back to it.
Oh man, now this boat smells like puke and poop, because everyone shit their pants when they saw this wave.
No, I was seriously thinking that. Well, and like a ton of troops, like after the wave hit, like started getting on their like life jackets and like heading for the decks, being like, we've been hit by like,
well, that's it,
because like they're so deep in the ship that like they'd get hit and just be like, what the fuck was that? And they thought it was a torpedo and started to like try and evacuate the ship, and they basically had to call out like, no, we're fine, I mean, we're still battling this storm, but we're fine. And so everybody kind of calmed down. But another little interesting tidbit about her, as things calmed down a little bit, some pretty major figures actually started to sort of take the Queen Mary between the US and the UK, including one Colonel Warden. Do you know anything about Colonel Warden?
I do not.
That's because it's a pseudonym for Winston Churchill.
Oh, that guy.
Winston Churchill would always sail under the name Colonel Warden to avoid suspicion that he was being taken across. But he really liked the Queen Mary. From what I read, it sounded like he had spent some time on her when she was a commercial vessel, and so when he was expected to ride on it, they would basically re-fancify one of the rooms and a sort of like cigar lounge for him and like his cabinet to travel through. But yeah, they would kind of keep a drawing room as well. And at one point, another fun Churchillicism, he was being taken aboard, and they said that lice had been discovered aboard, and would he prefer to board a different ship and avoid possible infection? To which he responded, I can scratch as well as anyone, thank you, and continued to board the Queen Mary.
Let's go.
So, at one point while he was on board, an explosion went off 300 feet from the Mary. They weren't really sure what it was. They thought that she might have set off a mine, but if it was that far out and the mine went off, people were kind of like, man, does that degaussing shit even work? And I kind of had the same question. But a little further along, Queen Mary actually set the record for the time that still stands today, which I thought was pretty amazing, for the most people on board a naval vessel at one time. And that was your hint in the beginning. 16,683 souls aboard.
Ever?
Yeah, ever. Still stands today.
Wow.
Which is also pretty crazy. A few other little fun tidbits as the war was generally becoming more clear that the Allies were gonna win. So Commodore Bissett was the guy in charge of the Queen Mary, and he regularly supposedly talked about how well behaved the U.S. troops were, because when they started loading her up to 16,000 troops, they did the math and figured out they were going to clear the Hudson Tunnel underneath the harbor by 4 inches.
Nice.
And so he was like, if all of these stupid Americans rush off to one side of the ship and start like waving goodbye to their families, like we're gonna hit it. And so as they were starting to roll out, he was like, all right, when I give you boys the signal, like, you all have to space yourselves out throughout the ship and do not move. Like, do not budge. And was amazed when the 16,000 U.S. troops did exactly as told and spread out among the ship and stood perfectly still for something like 30 minutes as they made sure they were completely clear of the harbor and any possible obstructions they could run aground on.
Huh.
But
that's like the exact opposite of what I expect.
Yeah, I mean, me too. So I wonder if a good dose of that was like, listen, if you don't want to fucking sink and die, get in place and stand still. And I think that'd get most people to cooperate. But
yeah, maybe the ship was famous enough at that point where they were like, yeah, we should do what they're telling us to do.
Yeah, no, I think that probably played a part as well. And a nice little bit about Commodore Bissett as well is that he was like, hey, this is a luxury cruise liner, and because we all want this war to end, we want her to go back to being one at some day. So please don't fuck with a lot of the like nice wood and like nice furnishings of the ship while you're here. He's like, as sort of compensation, you can do whatever the hell you want to the railings of the ship on the decks. And so for pretty much her whole history, she had a metric shitload of graffiti, but it was all confined to the wood of the outdoor railings. So I thought that
gotcha.
He was also like, yeah, American troops actually like didn't destroy the inside of this very nice ship, and they promised that they were going to keep it like that, but after the war it got sanded down except for I think like a 6-foot stretch that ended up getting donated to a museum. But anyway, a fun little bit of weirdly personal history ties into this next part. So, in the very end, the war ends, the Allies have emerged victorious from World War II, and both of the queens, Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, have made it through. And so in 1946, both ships are retained under military service to begin transporting war brides and the children of American GIs and war brides back to the U.S. So they begin converting it back into its kind of nicer state. A lot of the very terrible looking 18-inch between bunks are torn out, or actual bedding is put in, tons of cribs. Part of the kitchen is dedicated to just keeping warm and sending out baby formula. But it's really just trying to sort of unite those women in Europe who had married American GIs. And the personal bit of this comes in where Anna's great-grandmother, for reference listeners, Anna is my lovely wife, but Anna's great-grandmother, Lily, was actually a war bride, and I did a little bit of sort of asking around, and she actually came to the U.S. on the Queen Mary.
No shit.
Yeah, which
That's cool.
I thought was such an interesting end to my research into it, because after a while the ship kind of went back into just being a luxury cruise liner, but for that little bit it ferried war brides to and from Europe and the US, and Anna's great-grandma Lily was one of those war brides. So
that's pretty cool.
yeah, I thought it was a cool little tie-in. All right, Jack, do you want to guess how many 1,000 nautical miles she had sailed by the end of everything?
Let's say
Let's look up the conversion of a nautical mile to an actual mile, by the way.
that's a good idea. If I had to guess actual miles, let's say like 3 million. I really have no clue.
So a nautical mile is about 1.15 miles on land, and at least according to the source that I found, she had sailed 530,000 nautical miles.
Oh, okay.
So not in the millions.
Overshot a little bit.
Not in the millions, for sure. But she returned to service as a luxury crew liner for a little bit, and then was eventually purchased by, oddly enough, California. And they promised that with their purchase of the Queen Mary, they were going to use her for sort of preservation purposes as a historical item. And so she was brought up to California, where she was greeted by the largest flotilla she had ever seen. Like hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of personal and commercial vessels all sailed out to greet her. And she actually made the trip because she was too fat for the Panama Canal. She made the trip from Scotland all the way down around the southern tip of South America and up to California. So her final voyage was actually her longest, and she did it all under her own power.
Wow.
So made it there, where she still sits, and she apparently is now visited by BuzzFeed people.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that makes sense now because they're based in Los Angeles.
Yep.
So I was like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yep. So I'm pretty sure she's sitting out in L.A. Or somewhere in California. I didn't write down exactly where, but yeah, she's just chilling out. They've dressed her up nice, and you can go and tour her. So if you happen to be out California way somewhere, and you think you want to go visit it, I would suggest it.
Very cool.
Yeah. And that, at the very least, comes to the end of my section on the HMS Queen Mary. But I'm pretty curious, what was the spooky factor of the Queen Mary?
So, like in most of the BuzzFeed Unsolved Supernatural, like the show is basically Ryan says like creepy stuff happens, and like Ryan talks about the history of the boat, and he's like, did you hear that? When they hear something, and like Shane's like, yeah, it was like a bird or something. Like Ryan was like, oh, it was a ghost, and he's like, no, it probably wasn't. Like that's like the whole show. And
Okay, fair.
I mean, yeah, they talked about like the war and like, you know, oh, people like suffered on this boat, that kind of stuff. And
I did glaze over the fact that she did often transport prisoners back from Europe, and they did store them in the mass storage part in the nose of the ship, which had like no real seating or like anything, and could rise and fall by as much as 30 degrees every couple seconds. So the people, they definitely didn't have a fun time.
Yeah, it's not ideal. The most distinct thing I remember is like there were at least 2 deaths on the ship. Obviously there were more, but before Dub 2, when it was still a luxury cruise liner, somehow 2 people managed to drown inside the indoor swimming pools in the ship.
You are shitting
which
me. Literally
I am
surrounded by ocean, and somebody fucking drowns in the pool.
2 people drowned.
Oh, just like you were on the one thing that kept you from drowning, and you managed to drown on it. Oh God. All right. I'll continue.
So, I mean, that's really it. It was kind of a while ago that I watched the video. So, it's like any old thing. People are like, could the spirits still be lingering in this place? And you're like, yeah, sure, I guess.
Like literally anywhere that humans have lived at any time. Oh, man. Well, there was actually a little bit of confusion that I also thought was funny. When I first started researching this, there was apparently an HMS Queen Mary, a Lion-class battle cruiser that the British built right before World War One. But man, it just had a very short history. I was reading it and I was like,
nothing of note.
I was like, this can't be what Jack was talking about, because like it's basically like the HMS Queen Mary construction began in 1911. She was put to sea in 1912, commissioned in 1913, and then sunk 3 years later, after missing 2 important battles that she was supposed to be at, and then just getting blown the fuck up at the very beginning of the third. It's like, okay, I don't think this is the one you were talking about.
We're gonna have to dig for some more material here.
I mean, granted,
that's fun.
It was fun being like, oh, World War One warship. Let's do some reading. But it's like all this detail on like propulsion, armament, fire control, armor, career, and then it's like first battle. Let's see. They just didn't do that much. They were in a raid where they just didn't do that much, and then the Battle of Jutland, they just got obliterated. So,
that reminds me, that the OG Queen Mary, we need to do an episode about the William D. Porter. If you remember that one.
William D. Porter. I do not.
Yeah. There's a Salmonella video about it.
Oh, is that like
the Willie D?
Yeah, the most incompetent ship in the U.S. Navy. Like almost
something like
almost
that.
Killed FDR.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we could do that one. We can copy off our boy Salmonella. Which also, if you guys haven't seen Salmonella, He hasn't made videos in forever, but he's pretty fucking funny. So,
rest in peace.
What college does to a motherfucker. All right. Well, with that kind of bringing us to a close, why don't we go to what are we calling this segment? We came up with a name for it.
Personal time corner.
Personal time corner. Sure. So what's been going?
We'll shop it.
Working name. So what's been going on in your personal life, Jack?
Recently, I don't know what made me think of it, and maybe it was like doing more of this like naval history stuff, but I just thought randomly about the band Sabaton. And
yeah.
I used to kind of listen to them in middle school, and I was like, I wonder what they're up to now. And like I listened to their most recent album, which I think is called The Great War. I think it came out in 2018, and I was like, it's the same damn music that I was listening to in middle school.
Absolutely
Nothing has
identical.
changed. It is still power metal about World War II, now World War I as well, I guess. But not amazing, but like, you know, you could kind of appreciate it still.
Yeah, it's some good fun. I get you. Oh, well, on my end, my birthday is coming up. So I've been trying to think of what the hell I want to do for that. My wife and I have been house hunting. We have a very promising one that we're going to tour tomorrow. So
let's go.
If we really like it, and if the absolute insanity of the housing market doesn't just screw us, we'd have a house soon. But
that's awesome, dude.
I hope so. I hope it's awesome, because it looks incredible from the pictures. It's within our budget range. It's where we want it to be. It should just be like good. Like we should be set if it's everything it's promised to be, and if our offer gets accepted. But we'll see.
If it's not built on Indian burial ground.
Yeah. If I get haunted in like the 15 minutes I spend touring the place, I might still consider it, but I think Anna will be out.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, no, I thank you. I hope it goes well, but you know, we've had ones in the past where we've been like, yo, and then gone to see it in person and been like, this kind of sucks. And so it's always a toss up until you see it in person.
For sure.
All right. With that, I believe we're done. So, Jack, would you like to make an attempt at the outro this time?
Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Queen Mary as much as I did. We'll see y'all next time.
See you all next time, indeed. More thoroughly researched historical events regarding sea things coming your way. See you all next time.
Oh, Johnny, Johnny, call and hear the ancient song of sailors long forgone and sailors still to be. A sweet and solemn tune spoke gently by the tide. Oh, Johnny, Johnny, fall, join the song.